My name is Darius, and this is my family betrayal and revenge story. There's something about the hum of early morning in Little Rock that always centers me, the smell of dew on cracked concrete, the distant bark of a dog, the hiss of a bus pulling up at the corner. It reminds me where I came from, and how far I've climbed. I used to wake up in a two-room apartment on the South End, where the walls were thin and the hopes thinner. Mama cleaned houses on Maple Street, same street I live on now, funny enough. She'd come home with aching knees and bruised pride, but she never stopped praying we'd rise above it, and I did. I took over my father's construction company after he passed, Tucker Sons. It was barely hanging on, running off scraps and good faith. My uncles thought I'd sell it. But I put my head down, poured sweat into every project. Roofing in the Arkansas heat, laying tile, chasing leads, whatever it took. Within 5 years, I had the company bidding on major commercial sites. Within 10, we were one of the most trusted names in the city. Now, I stand on the porch of my 5-bedroom house on Maple Street, drinking coffee from a real ceramic mug, not the styrofoam ones we reused growing up. My name's etched into signs across the city. My workers wear my company's logo with pride. I've done more than survive, I've built something that lasts. This house isn't just a house. It's a monument. A promise kept, and yet. I should have known peace doesn't last forever. Not in this family. The call came on a Tuesday. I was reviewing blueprints when Mama rang. "Your brother's out," she said, soft like she was breaking bad news. "Terrence, my little brother, who used to trail behind me like a shadow. Smart as hell, too clever for his own good. Got mixed up in the streets, caught 2 charges before 25. When he got sentenced, I didn't visit. Not once. I couldn't. Part of me was angry. The other part? Tired of watching him burn every hand that tried to pull him up. He got nowhere to go," Mama added. "I was hoping you might." I already knew where she was going, and I should have said no, but something in her voice pulled me back to the nights we huddled together in the cold, sharing one blanket, pretending we were superheroes. Something in me wanted to believe he could change. "Tell him to call me," I said. The legacy I built had weathered storms. I just didn't know one was already on its way, wearing my last name and walking back into my life, and this time, the damage wouldn't come from outside, it would come from within. When I first saw Terrence again, it was like time folded in on itself. He stood outside my office in a faded denim jacket, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, same crooked smile from when we were kids trying to hustle snacks outside the rec center. But there was something different in his eyes, harder, like prison had carved out something soft and replaced it with silence. "Damn, big bro," he said, arms out. "You really did it." I pulled him in for a hug, firm and fast. He smelled like cheap soap and bus station grease. My gut twisted, unsure if it was guilt or pride. Maybe both. We sat in my office for an hour. I offered him a drink, he chose water. He didn't talk much about prison. Just said it was loud, cold, and full of men who couldn't remember who they used to be. I asked him what he wanted to do now. He shrugged. "Start fresh. Get it right this time." Mama had begged me to help him, and I wanted to believe he meant it. Everyone else had their doubts. My project manager, Lionel, pulled me aside the next day. "You sure about this, D?" he asked. "Man's got a record. You got contracts on the line." Even Aunt Ruby called to say I was being soft. "Blood don't mean loyalty," she warned. "Don't let him drag you back down." But I saw the boy I once knew, the one who used to wrap his arms around my waist on the bike, who shared his last piece of cornbread when I was hungry. I couldn't forget that, so I brought him in. I gave him a job on site, simple stuff at first. Sweeping, hauling lumber, cleanup. He worked quiet and steady. Showed up early, stayed late. After 2 weeks, I handed him keys to the upstairs guest room in my house. "I'm trusting you," I said. "Don't make me regret it." He just nodded. "You won't." Nights got easier. We ate together like old times, talked football, laughed over old stories about the time he fell through a rotted porch and blamed the dog. It felt like healing. He even started reading business books I gave him, asked smart questions about the projects. He said he wanted to learn the ropes, maybe run a cruise someday. I told myself this was what second chances looked like, but redemption has a shadow, and sometimes, while you're busy rebuilding bridges, someone else is setting fire to the other end. What I didn't know was that Terrence had already found cracks in my foundation, cracks I didn't see until the smoke started rising. At first, it was little things. A few missing bags of cement on the Jefferson Street project. A delay in lumber delivery that no one could explain. An invoice from a supplier I'd never heard of, twice the normal cost for half the materials. I chalked it up to errors. Construction isn't a clean business. Mistakes happen. Miscommunications, paperwork mix-ups, delivery guys showing up at the wrong site. It wasn't unheard of, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One morning, I noticed Terrence rolling up late to the Maple Hill remodel. He'd always been early, coffee in hand and ready to work. But this time, his eyes were bloodshot, and he kept checking his phone like something urgent was pulling him. "You good?" I asked, watching him unload drywall like his mind was somewhere else. Yeah, he mumbled. Just didn't sleep well. Long night. That made two of us. A week later, Lionel came into my office holding a clipboard and a raised brow. "You approve this?" he asked, slapping down a copy of a supplier contract. I skimmed it. Larkin Supply Company. I'd never done business with them. Terrence put in the order, Lionel said. "Said it came from you." I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was close. Too close. That night, I sat at my desk long after everyone else had gone home. I pulled invoices from the last 2 months, everything Terrence had touched. At first glance, it looked fine. But a deeper look told the truth: overcharges. Duplicate orders. Materials that never made it to the sites. Payments rerouted to vendors with no addresses, and the signatures, sloppy imitations. My name twisted into something sinister. I felt sick. Was it possible I was being paranoid? Was Terrence really capable of this? I remembered how he hugged me when I handed him those house keys. How grateful he'd looked, how sincere his voice had sounded, but sincerity is a hell of a mask. I started making calls. Quiet ones. Suppliers. Delivery drivers. Even a contact at the bank. The pieces began fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle soaked in betrayal. One driver admitted he was told to drop materials off at a warehouse on the South End, nowhere near any of our projects. Another supplier said Darius requested cash payments. I hadn't touched cash in 5 years. By the end of the night, my hands were shaking. Terrence wasn't just taking a second chance. He was selling it, stealing from me, from the company, from the legacy. I sat in my office staring at the framed photo of my father and me on the first job site we ever worked together. The pride in his eyes back then burned now like shame in mine. Something had to be done, and next time I looked Terrence in the eye, I'd be ready. It's strange how silence can feel louder than shouting. The night I finally confronted Terrence, the house on Maple Street was dead quiet. No music, no TV, no excuses left hanging in the air. Just two brothers sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, a storm brewing between us. I dropped the printed invoices on the table like evidence in a courtroom. "You signed my name," I said, voice tight. "You rerouted payments. You took materials that never made it to any of my job sites. You stole from me, from this company. From our father's legacy." Terrence leaned back in the chair like he was tired of pretending. "No guilt. No apology, so what?" he said. "You act like you're some kind of king now. Like you didn't climb off my back to get where you are." I froze. "Climb off your? You were in prison while I was out there breaking my back to keep this business alive." He shrugged. "You think that house, that company, that name makes you better than me?" You've always had more. Mama always treated you like the golden child. Maybe this was just me getting a little of what I'm owed. My throat burned. Owed? You think you're owed for wrecking your own life? That's when Mama walked in. She must have heard everything from the hallway. She looked between us, her eyes heavy with sorrow. Don't talk to your brother like that, she said quietly. I stood up, shocked. Mama, you knew? She hesitated, just for a second too long. He told me a little. Said he was struggling. Said he just needed some help. Darius. You have so much. You could have shared. Shared? I said, stunned. I gave him a job. A place to stay. A second chance. She raised her voice, the first time in years. You gave him crumbs. You wave that house and company around like it's just yours. But we all suffered to get here. And maybe he didn't go the right way about it, but he's still your brother. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who used to scrub toilets on this very street just so we could eat. And now she was defending the same son who forged my name and gutted the very legacy she bled to help create. Something in me cracked. Not loudly, but clean and final, like snapping a rotten beam. I turned to Terence. You're out. Pack your things and be gone by morning. He stared at me like he didn't believe I'd do it, but I'd already done it in my heart. Mama's tears followed me out of the room, but I didn't stop walking. Some lines, once crossed, don't get redrawn. And blood may be thicker than water, but poison is thicker than both. This wasn't just betrayal, this was war. Bad news doesn't walk through the front door, it kicks it down. The first call came from a longtime client, Mr. Callahan. Darius, I hate to do this, man, he said, voice laced with discomfort, but we're pulling out of the Willow Creek project. Word is, there's been irregularities. Mismanagement. We can't risk our investment. I tried to keep my voice steady. Give me a week to clear this up. But he'd already made up his mind. We're going with someone else. That was the first domino. The rest fell fast and hard. Suppliers backed out of their deals. Subcontractors stopped answering calls. One even sent a lawyer's letter demanding back pay for a job Terence had supposedly approved, with a forged signature and no paper trail. Then came the kicker. My bank froze the company account pending investigation into fraudulent withdrawals. Everything I'd built was collapsing like a house with no foundation. I stood in my office that Friday afternoon, looking around at the blueprints rolled up in the corner, the plaques on the wall, the photo of my father with dust collecting in the frame. It felt like watching a dream unravel in real time. Even my crew was slipping away. Lionel came in with his cap in his hand. I gotta look out for my family, D, he said, voice heavy with guilt. Too many red flags. If this ship's sinking, I can't go down with it. I didn't argue. What could I say? Loyalty only stretches so far when paychecks stop clearing. That night, I sat in the kitchen of the Maple Street house, the same kitchen where I'd once fed Terence home-cooked meals, thinking I was saving him. Now that same brother had burned down everything from the inside, and I was the one left in the ashes. A letter from the mortgage company sat on the table, unopened. I already knew what it said. With the company bleeding and my savings drained covering damage control, I was behind on payments. The house, my house, was days away from foreclosure. Mama hadn't come by since the confrontation. Word around town was she'd moved in with Aunt Ruby on the south side. She wasn't returning my calls. To her, I was the son who destroyed the family, but I wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt. I was just tired of carrying everyone. Tired of being the glue while everyone else pulled apart. Tired of watching people spit on what I'd bled to build. I walked outside and stood on the porch, staring down Maple Street. The same street where Mama used to clean houses. The same street where I swore I'd never go back to being poor, broken, forgotten. But now I was all three. The question wasn't whether I could save what was left, the question was whether I had anything left worth saving. When everything falls apart, the silence afterward is deafening. No more calls. No more contracts. No more crew piling into the office at sunrise. The company I built was a ghost town, and I was the only one left walking through its remains. But even in the rubble, something inside me refused to die. I looked around at what I still had: a beat-up office, a half-full tool shed, and my hands. That was enough. It had to be. First, I sold the truck. The black F-150 with custom rims and leather seats, the one thing I swore I'd never part with. But sentiment doesn't pay mortgage bills. I listed it that same day, handed the keys to a stranger with cash in hand, and watched it disappear down the road like another piece of my old life. Then I called Lionel. "I'm not asking you to come back," I told him. "But if you know anyone still willing to work, loyal, quiet, and hungry, send them my way." He sent me 2 names, Miguel and Chris. Both young, no frills, solid work ethic. They didn't ask questions. Just showed up with their boots on and eyes sharp. That was all I needed. We started small. Patch jobs. Fixing porches, repairing fences. Laying gravel in driveways. I went door to door around the neighborhoods people forgot, the ones big companies didn't bother bidding in. I undercut rates, worked fast, and built trust. Word spread. 3 weeks in, we were booked every day. Not glamorous jobs, but honest ones. By the end of the first month, I had enough to pay Miguel and Chris a full wage, restock supplies, and cover the mortgage for another 60 days. It wasn't much, but it was movement, and in that slow grind, I started finding pieces of myself again. I remembered what it felt like to carry lumber under the Arkansas sun, to shake hands with grateful clients who paid in cash and sweet tea. No suits, no spreadsheets, just sweat, soil, and satisfaction. One afternoon, after we finished repairing a wheelchair ramp for an elderly vet, the man pressed a $20 bill into my hand and said, "Y'all didn't just fix the ramp. You gave me back my independence." I walked away from that house with a lump in my throat. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about redemption, mine. I didn't need the flash, the name, or even the house. I just needed a reason to keep going, and slowly, brick by brick, I was laying a new foundation, not just for a business, but for the man I wanted to be. Some wounds heal, but others need to be cleaned out first, or they just keep rotting underneath. Even as I worked to rebuild, something gnawed at me late at night. It wasn't anger anymore, and it wasn't revenge either. It was the weight of unfinished business. Terrence hadn't just betrayed me, he'd committed a crime. A crime that almost destroyed everything, and the worst part? He was still out there, walking free, probably running some new game. One night, I sat down at my desk with a flash drive, 2 folders, and a fresh pot of coffee. I opened my laptop and started going through everything, every invoice, every email, every shady transaction. Terrence hadn't even been careful. His arrogance left a trail a mile wide. I pulled out the forged contracts first. The fake signatures that looked like mine but always had a slight loop in the T that I never used. I matched them against real documents, scanned every one, and labeled them. Then I found the altered vendor orders, materials rerouted to a closed warehouse I tracked down on Google Maps. I saved screenshots of texts between Terrence and a supplier where he promised a cash bonus if they didn't ask too many questions. I even had security camera footage of him entering the office late one night when he wasn't supposed to be there, picking the lock on the filing cabinet where we kept blank checks. I couldn't believe I'd missed so many signs. But now? I saw it all. And I knew what I had to do. Still, I hesitated. Mama's voice echoed in my head, "He's still your brother." And a part of me wrestled with the thought of sending my own blood back to prison. We'd shared too many nights in the dark, too many struggles, too many memories, but then I remembered the day the bank froze my accounts. The day I thought I'd lose the house. The day my crew walked away. Terrence didn't just steal money. He stole trust, time, and 10 years of hard-earned respect, so I called a lawyer. Mr. Cleary was slow-moving, sharp-eyed, and calm in a way that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. He reviewed every file, every screenshot, every line of forged ink, open and shut case, he said, closing the folder. We'll prepare everything for the DA. He won't walk away from this. I handed it all over. The flash drive. The folders. Everything. When I walked out of that office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy. But it was the weight of closure, not guilt. Terrence made his choices, and now, so had I. The knock came early on a Tuesday morning. Cold air drifted through the half-cracked window of my office as I watched two unmarked cars pull up across the street. A moment later, officers stepped out, flanking a third man in plain clothes, Detective Sanders, the one Mr. Cleary had been working with. By the time I got outside, they were already knocking on the door of the duplex where Terrence had been staying. He didn't run. He didn't shout, he just stared at me as they cuffed him, like he was still waiting for me to stop it. I didn't, Mama called 2 hours later. Her voice was hoarse from crying. You really did it, she said. You turned your own brother in. I closed my eyes. I turned in a criminal, Mama. He made his choices. He's your family. She screamed. You could have helped him. You could have saved him. I did help him. I said quietly. And he robbed me blind. The line went dead. She hasn't called back since, but I don't regret it. Justice, I learned, doesn't always feel like justice. It's not clean. It's not pretty. Sometimes it means losing people you love to save the life you've built. Sometimes it means being the villain in someone else's story just to be the hero in your own. I didn't go back to business as usual after Terrence's arrest. Something in me had changed. Rebuilding the company wasn't enough. I wanted to rebuild something bigger. Something more meaningful. So I started with a flyer. Printed it myself and posted it around the South End. Second start, construction skills for former inmates. No judgment. Real work. Real change. At first, no one showed up, then came Marcus. 22. Just out of Wrightsville, trying to find his footing. Then James, who hadn't held a steady job since he got out 2 years ago. Then Mariah, tough as nails and twice as skilled as most of the men I'd worked with. She'd done time for defending herself in a bad relationship. We worked small jobs together, side by side, laying concrete, fixing porches, repainting homes for elderly residents. They learned tools and trade. I learned patience, leadership, and how to listen without judgment. I didn't start the program to replace Terrence. But in helping others who truly wanted to change, I began healing from what he'd done. And maybe, just maybe, I was breaking a cycle that had swallowed too many men in my family already. Justice wasn't about putting my brother in prison, it was about preventing another young man from ending up there, and that was a different kind of justice, one that didn't just punish the past, but protected the future. The porch creaked beneath my boots as I stepped out into the golden light of a late Arkansas morning. Maple trees swayed gently, casting long shadows across the yard. The air smelled like sawdust and fresh opportunity. Just down the block. My new crew was finishing the frame on a duplex, our latest affordable housing project. I smiled. The sign across the front yard read, "Built by Maple Legacy Builders." I'd changed the name 6 months earlier. Tucker Sons had too many ghosts, too much baggage. Maple Legacy was more than just a name, it was a mission. To build better homes. Better futures. And to never forget the street that raised me. Business was thriving again. Not just because of good work, but because people saw what we stood for. We weren't just laying bricks, we were laying hope. And folks respected that. Clients came back. Banks reopened doors. Even Lionel returned, no apologies, just rolled up sleeves and a quiet, "Let's get to work." As for the mentorship program, it was growing. 4 of my apprentices now ran their own crews. Every Friday, we met in the same office Terrence once helped gut, trading ideas over takeout and laughter. I had rebuilt more than a company, I had rebuilt myself. The phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the morning peace. I glanced down at the screen, Terrence, Pulaski County Jail. My hand tightened around the phone. It wasn't the first time he'd tried to reach me. The last time he'd left a voicemail, his voice was quieter than I remembered. "I messed up, man. I know I did. But I'm still your brother." Yeah. He was, but sometimes blood isn't enough. Not when trust has been shattered so completely. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I slid the phone back into my pocket. Some calls don't need answers. Across the street, Miguel waved at me from the worksite, clipboard in hand. I gave him a nod, proud of how far he'd come, from cleanup duty to site manager in under a year. That's the kind of story I wanted to be part of now, not revenge. Redemption. The old Darius might have burned everything down just to get even. But this version of me? I'd learned the best revenge isn't making them pay, it's thriving in the aftermath. It's standing tall where they thought you'd fall. The house on Maple Street still stood, stronger than ever, not just because I saved it, but because I became it, solid. Rooted. Unshakable, and as the sound of hammers echoed down the block, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a legacy.